Hi, it's Dawn here at Stickleton, and I want to do a bit of a different video this evening. I've just got out the shower. I'm in my big oversized fleecy jumper. Fire is lit. Dogs are stretched out in front of it. We're waiting for Martin to come home. But I just wanted to address something. And what I want to address is CSF leaks. CSF stands for cerebral spinal fluid. So a CSF leak means you're leaking cerebral spinal fluid from either your spine or from your head, surrounding the brain or whatever. The fluid actually surrounds your whole brain and goes down your spine, and it helps to cushion the brain, and it helps to protect the spinal cord. And up until September last year, so that was September 2021, I'd never heard of a CSF leak. And then on the 19th of September, I suddenly developed one. And it came on spontaneous. And it started with leaking fluid out of my left nostril. Just literally fluid. It was just like a tap had been turned on. I've got a bit of a short video here I'll put in. This video which shows my leak. It was a video that was done for my doctor, and so the video is a bit grainy, but you can actually see how the leak had presented itself. When my leak first started, I was actually standing talking to a friend in the kitchen, and I could feel fluid or something running down the back of my throat, and it tasted salty, metallic. And I thought, oh, have I got a bit of a nosebleed or something? And I could feel it sort of coming out the front of my nose, and I kept wiping, and there was no blood or nothing. But it was running constantly down the back of my throat. And I couldn't sort of figure it out, and I was sort of coughing and choking a bit. My friend left anyway. I never said anything. My friend left, and I went through to the bathroom, and when I leaned over, it literally just poured out. It was like a tap had been turned on. And it was quite frightening when it happened. It didn't hurt. It just, clear liquid just started pouring. And then, of course, every time I tilted my head up, it was obvious the liquid was coming down the back of my throat. Martin was out at the time. He'd gone into town to pick something up. So I was here alone, and within an hour, I started feeling nauseous, dizzy, started losing my balance. My head was absolutely pounding. And I thought, this just isn't right. There's something wrong here. And there's nothing I could do to stem the flow. It was just literally pouring. Turned to my good old friend Google, and Googled it, and it kept coming up with CSF leak, cranial leak, spontaneous leak. And the symptoms I was presenting was typical of a cranial leak. all the information I was reading was based Australia, America, India, and I couldn't find any information in the UK. I phoned the doctor's surgery and asked for a telephone appointment. I wanted the doctor to call me back. The doctor phoned back. I explained to him what was going on, and he said, "You need to come down to surgery. I need to do an examination." So then Martin came in, and I told him what had happened, and he could see it, and he could actually see that at this point I was in quite a bad way, and I was struggling to walk, struggling to keep me balance. My speech was starting to become slurred. My eyes were very sensitive to light. So he put me in the car and we went down to the surgery, and I saw the doctor, and I said to the doctor, you know, I think it's a CSF leak, a spontaneous leak. And he said, "Have you had a head trauma?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, it won't be a leak then. You can't have a cranial leak without a head trauma." So, you know, he was looking in my ears, taking my temperature, looking at my nose, doing all that. And he said, "I think you've got a sinus infection." I thought, well, he's the doctor, he knows. And I thought, but I've never had issues like this. When I've had a sinus infection before, it was nothing like this. And the headache was at the back of my head. It was like a band across the back of my head. It wasn't frontal, it wasn't my face, nothing like that. And at this point I could actually feel like something was pulling, like I felt like my whole head was imploding on itself. It was all shrinking back in and it was being pulled down my spine. That's what it felt like was happening. So he gave me a nasal spray and sent me home. I used the spray. Within minutes of using the spray, I was getting excruciating pain up the front part of my head here. But I continued with the spray for a couple of days. I became bedridden, and I was up through the night, really ill, running a temperature, and I was in quite a bad way. So after a couple of days, we phoned the doctor and arranged to go back down again, and this time I saw a different doctor, and I told him, said to him about the spray, and I'm actually sitting there with a towel wrapped around me, catching the fluid as it's pouring out. It was still pouring. And the doctor got on the phone to ENT at the hospital and spoke to them, and the specialist there said he thought it was, I can't remember what he'd said now, it was some sort of bacterial infection to do with the sinuses, etc. Gave me a different spray and said to use a neti pot to rinse out my sinuses with salt water. So I went home, did that. 48 hours, I thought I was dying. I phoned up and I spoke to the doctor, and I continued to do research on this, and I was convinced this is what I had. I'd actually found a group on Facebook for CSF leaks, and people on there who had cranial leaks, their symptoms were exactly like I had. So I phoned up the doctor again, and I said to him, I want the fluid tested, because this is what I'd read on the group that needs to be done. They needed to test the fluid for a B2 transferrin protein. And the doctor was saying to me, no, you haven't had a head trauma, you know, so it's very unlikely that it's a leak. And I said, well, just put my mind at rest and let's have the fluid tested. At this point, I wasn't even fit enough to get in the car to go down to the surgery. So my husband went down and collected a specimen pot, and we had to get it to the surgery by, I think it was by 11 o'clock or something the next morning, and they needed a minimum of 5 mil. I was losing, which is about a teaspoon, that's what they needed. I was losing about half a pint of fluid a day, so it was no problem collecting the fluid. So next morning I collected it, my husband took it straight down, and it was sent off to the lab. I knew the process was going to take a while for the test, and then over the next few days my husband had to go away to work, and I said I'll be fine. I'd be okay for a while. Every time I lay down, what would happen was I would lose so much fluid. Pillows were getting soaked, cushions were getting soaked. I'd have several pillows during the night, and I'd have to keep changing them, towels on top of pillows. It was just literally just pouring out. So Martin had gone back to work, and I remember it was a Tuesday afternoon, and I'd gone to feed the goats. Anything I did absolutely exhausted me, so I had to really pace myself. Go and feed this animal, sit down for 10 minutes, go and feed that animal, sit down. And I was having to do it like that. And I was in the goat house when my mobile rang, and this was my doctor. And he said to me, this was about 6 o'clock in the evening, and he'd said, we've got the results of your tests back. And I said, right, okay, what is it, or what isn't it? And he said, I've really got to apologise to you. It is cranial fluid you're losing. So I was a bit taken aback, although I wasn't surprised, because that's what I expected. But he was so apologetic, and he said, you know, what you're doing at the moment. I says, well, I'm actually in the goat house, just having a bit of a tidy up, you know, just fed them. And he said, you're not to handle any animals or anything like that. You've just got to sit and rest. And he said, I'm going to refer you on to a specialist at the hospital, and they'll contact you in the next 48 hours. And he said, and he says, and you're not to be left on your own either. He says, you know, this is quite a serious thing. So I phoned my husband, came in the house, phoned my husband, told him what the doctor said. And he said, he says, well, I'll come back early then. So he came back the next day. And then I remember it was Thursday. And got the phone call with an appointment to see the specialist the following week. That was it. And went to see this specialist, and of course it's all during these COVID times, so you had to go in on your own. In fact, my friend took me down to see the specialist, and saw him, and he did a camera examination up through the nose and everything, and he could actually see the fluid coming through the back of the nose and running down my throat. And of course he could visually see the fluid pouring out as well. And he said he was going to arrange for a CT scan and an MRI scan, because they needed to determine where the leak was. And they kept going over this. Have you had a head trauma? You know, all of this. No, I haven't. No, I haven't. So he sent me for some blood tests as well. And again, he'd basically went over what my doctor said, and that was, you are not to handle any animals, you're not to do any gardening, nothing like that. You're at a very high risk of getting meningitis. Anyway, cut a long story short, it was quite a few weeks later, got my appointment through for my MRI scan and my CT scan, both done on the same afternoon. Had them done, then had to wait for another appointment. And I was toing and froing between doctors and hospitals and being passed from one to the other. They did scans of the back of my eyes and all this sort of thing. After months and months of seeing doctors and specialists at different hospitals all over the place, I finally met with a skull-based surgeon and a neuro team, and they said to me they were going to operate, and what they'd found was I'd fractured my cribriform plate, and your cribriform plate is between your eyes, behind your nose, and it's a little honeycomb shaped plate, one on each side, where all the nerves, facial nerves, etc., all go up through to the brain, etc. And he said mine was paper thin and it had fractured. So that was May this year. And so yes, they were going to operate, they were going to repair the cribriform plate, and he explained to me, you know, what was involved and how long a stay in hospital it would be, and they'd have a pressure shunt put in my spine, etc. And how long the recovery period was going to be and all of that. So we are now into, what are we now, October, and I'm still waiting. I was told at the time by the surgeon I'm on the urgent list. It's a specialist operation and it's done in a special theatre, and the theatre's only available once a week. And needless to say, you know, there's a backlog of people, etc. Anyway, I'm still waiting. It's now October. I've been on the urgent list since May. I've been back down to see my own doctor. He seems to think it will be done before the end of this year, hopefully before the end of November. And I've then been to see another neurosurgeon who has requested another couple of different scans, and this Saturday I'm going for an MRI scan with contrast so they can see all the veins, etc., surrounding the brain area. And what they're looking for is narrowing of the arteries, blockages in the arteries and the veins, etc. See if there's any evidence that I might have had a stroke at some point, that I might have had a brain infection or anything, because they need to find out what has caused they say the fracture has been caused by a sudden rise of fluid pressure surrounding the brain. And let me get this straight now. So they need to find the cause of what is causing the increase in pressure, fluid pressure. He also wants a lumbar puncture done, so I'm still waiting for that one to come through. So yeah, so that is where I am. But the upshot of all this is, what I wanted to explain today is, because there's a lot of people going around who have got CSF leaks and they're not aware. Their doctors won't take them seriously. Doctors, you know, very, very rarely come across one. They're usually, a cranial leak is usually associated with a head trauma. So a spontaneous one, there is lots of other underlying conditions that can cause it. ED, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. There's all sorts of different things that can cause leaks. There's also another type of leak, which is a spinal fluid leak. So it's a CSF spinal leak, whereas mine's a CSF cranial leak. So am I still leaking? Yes, I am still leaking. and now I have a bilateral leak, so I leak from both sides. Most of the time, because I can keep my head back, the fluid is running down the back of my throat, and it is constant. If I lean forward, it will start to come out of my nose. I can't control it. That's why you often see me on videos and I'm wiping my nose like that. I can't control the leak at all. It is just there. The leak itself doesn't hurt, but there is lots of side effects from the leak, and the side effects all to do with the fluid balance in the brain. So my day starts with, when I get up in the morning, I'm usually horrendously thirsty because I will have lost a lot of fluid overnight. So first thing is I take a couple of painkillers to start with, because my head will be absolutely pounding because I'm slightly dehydrated. And also getting up from a lying down position causes my head to pound, and it pounds right across this bit at the back. So it's usually get up, take a couple of painkillers, and then it's make up an electrolyte drink and take that, because that helps to rebalance my electrolytes that I've lost. So I have that. Then I put my coffee maker on and I start making a really strong coffee. And by strong I mean it's the equivalent of 3 or 4 espressos. And I make that up, and I make it up into an iced coffee drink to have later in the day, because caffeine, a sudden boost of caffeine, helps your body to reproduce CSF cranial fluid, cerebral fluid, whatever, spinal fluid, helps your body to create it quicker. So if I've been losing a lot of fluid during the morning, having that in the afternoon can help rebalance me. So that is the first things I do in the morning. And then I'm not a coffee drinker, I'm a tea drinker. Throughout the day, any activities I do makes me leak more fluid. If sitting at the sewing machine, walking across the fields, in the polytunnels, lifting, I'm not supposed to lift anything, I'm not supposed to stretch, not supposed to reach up, reach out. Any arm movements causes the leak to come on more. So there's lots of things like that. Constant, it's like tinnitus, but it's constant changing of noises, and it's as the fluid changes, fluid levels change in my head. I'll get a lot of neck pain if I've been upright for too long. I actually get what they call brain sag, where the fluid levels have dropped so much that my brain starts sagging down, and that causes me a lot of pain in the back of my neck, at the base of my skull. I get my speech can become slurred. I can totally forget what I'm doing. I feel very spaced out sometimes. I have trouble focusing my eyes sometimes. I can become very sensitive to light. I sleep a lot, an awful lot. Within an hour of getting up in the morning, I can be fast asleep again. If I'm having a bad day, I can be sleeping most of the day, getting up for half an hour maybe, and then have to go back to sleep again. So there's lots of things going on. I'm what they call a functioning leaker. You see, I have trouble with my words. A functioning leaker, because I can still get around. I'm not bedbound. I have good days. I try and catch up on a lot of things, and that's when I'll try and do most of my videos, actually, on a good day. If I'm having a bad day, then I'm literally here on the sofa, and upstairs in bed, and I'm just sort of maybe pottering around the house, doing very, very little. Some evenings I can't even cook a meal. I drop things a lot. I can't seem to, my hand and eye coordination goes. And I can become very sensitive to noise. So a lot of the time, the TV volume will be turned off, radios are turned off. And what I'm finding difficult at the moment is having the builders here working. The noise from the builders can be, it can sort of set me off. And the noises I can hear, I do get earache sometimes with it, and it's all to do with the pressure and the fluid levels. But the noises, it's like, it's not a high-pitched noise, it's like a whooshing noise, or a bit like a wave machine, and it sort of sounds like that. So that's basically it. And I haven't come across anybody else who has got a leak. I know a lot of people on the internet who've got leaks. And there's a lot of people out there who've been battling for years to get a diagnosis, even just trying to get their doctors to test the fluid. And testing the fluid with a cranial leak is the only sure way of getting a diagnosis. They have to look for this protein, which is only present in cerebral fluid. And I don't really know a lot about spinal leaks. The two things are, they're not connected, but they're on the same path, because they are both leaks, and they're both leaking fluid, which serves the spine, a cushioning for the spine and the brain. So if I don't have the surgery, I'm at very, very high risk of getting meningitis. I'm also at a high risk of having seizures and strokes, etc. There's all sorts of little things like that. But what I wanted to do was to try and get the word out there. If you have got a persistent clear fluid, not mucus, this is like water, clear fluid dripping out of your nose or coming out of your ears or running down the back of your throat, please push your doctor to get the fluid tested. There's so little known out there, and general practitioners very rarely come across a case, and it is something that people need to be educated about. And it seems cranial leaks are more, what's the right word? I can't think of the words now. That's because I'm getting tired. It seems to be more women that tend to get them than men. Whether it's to do with bone thinning, osteoporosis, or whatever, I don't know. Who knows? And I do know that with the surgery, if they haven't found out the cause and they don't treat the root cause, then the leak will just start up somewhere else, because it's just a constant build-up of pressure, fluid pressure, and that fluid pressure has to go somewhere. So yeah, that is where I'm at the moment. And so if sometimes in some of my videos I come across a bit of a dizzy mare and I don't know what I'm doing, and etc., and I'm constantly doing this, sniffing, it's all part of my leak. So that's all I want to say on the subject. So this video's turned out a bit longer than what I expected, and I will try and keep you all updated as I go through the the treatment. That's it. As I go through the treatment and the operation, and and hopefully they'll find the cause of it all and they'll be able to deal with that as well. So take care everybody, and I'll catch up with you again soon.